Hey everybody, it's Jeremy with Humble Organics, and in this video I'm going to show you how to pot up your tomato seedlings into larger containers so they'll develop a really strong root system before you transplant them to the garden in a few weeks. We started our tomato seedlings indoors a few weeks ago in Jiffy peat pellets. And if you want more information on how we start our vegetable garden seeds inside, you can visit humbleorganics.com for some tips. We know it's time to pot these up into new containers because we're seeing a lot of roots poking through the fabric of the Jiffy peat pellet, and also the plant is getting taller, and we're just starting to see the development of the second set of true leaves on this plant. So that's a really good time to start this potting up process. First thing I want to do is zoom in on this tomato seedling and show you some important features. So the main thing I want to focus on here is along the stem. If you look here, you can see all of these little hairs. These little hairs are really important when you're potting up your tomato seedlings because all of these hairs are capable of forming a new root system. So when we pot up our seedlings, the most important tip is to bury them deep. Okay? So we're actually going to bury this not at the level that it was planted originally in this little peat pellet, but we're going to bury it up to here, just below these cotyledons. You want to make sure at this stage these cotyledons stay up above the soil line because they will photosynthesize, and they are a major source of nutrients and nourishment for the plant at the early stages of development. As it develops more leaves, these cotyledons are eventually going to yellow, dry out, and fall off. That's totally normal, doesn't indicate there's anything wrong with your plant. But that'll happen in probably about another week, week and a half. Potting up a tomato seedling is really easy to do. So you just need a few things. So first of all, you need some good potting soil. We use this organic potting soil. It's got a little bit of fertilizer in it, which is good. You don't want to overdo it with fertilizer on tomato seedlings because you can actually over-fertilize them quite easily. They don't need a lot of nutrients at this stage. So an organic potting soil with a little bit of fertilizer in it will be perfect. You also need pots. And you want to think deep here. The deeper the pot, the stronger the root system that plant's going to be able to develop. So it's really important to try to use something that gives the plant a lot of room to grow roots. So if you want a really inexpensive option, we use these 16-ounce cups. And you can see they're really deep, so this plant will be able to develop a really strong root system. We can also reuse these several times. So each year we just clean them out after we're done with them, and then we're able to reuse them multiple times. The one thing about your pots you want to make sure is that you poke some drainage holes in the bottom, okay? Because water needs to be able to get in and out of the plant, so you want to make sure to poke drainage holes in. Okay, so we've already done that here, and so to plant this tomato seedling, all we need to do is scoop out some potting soil. And I'm filling this up about 3/4 of the way, just so that when I set in this plant, you'll notice that the cotyledons are going to be right over the top. So we're going to be able to bury almost that entire stem, which is really important. Before we put the plant in though, I am going to add a little bit of water, just to get things nice and moist, and then I'm going to tamp that down. Okay, and then I can put my plant in and just add more soil, potting mix around. And again, you want to tamp that down, so give it some water. And the important thing here, the thing that you're aiming for, is to bury as much of that stem as you can in your potting mix. Okay, so that's about as deep as we're going to be able to get that one. So I'll let you take a look at what that looks like. Now that we have our seedling potted up, it's going to go back inside under the lights. We use LED shop lights, which are probably one of the more inexpensive options for growing plants inside. And when we use those LED shop lights, you want to make sure that the plant is just under the lights, so no more than a few inches. So as this plant gets taller, we're just going to raise those lights up along with it. But it's really important that it gets really close-up light for at least 16 to 18 hours a day when you're growing them inside. We also are going to water the plants once every couple days usually is enough. Basically just watch and see when the soil starts to dry out or when the potting mix starts to dry out, then that's a good time to give it a little water. It doesn't need to be sopping wet all the time for a tomato plant. The easiest way to water is just to keep your plants in a tray like this, and you can just pour water into the bottom. And since you've put holes in your pot, the moisture is just going to go right up to the plant. We'll keep this plant growing for probably about another 3 weeks before it's ready to transplant into the garden. And by that point, it's going to be probably about this tall, which is an ideal size. You actually don't want your plants to be really tall, old plants, sometimes maybe have started flowering or even producing a tomato. Those types of plants are not going to transplant to the garden well. So actually a shorter, sturdier plant is much better for transplanting into the garden. So before we actually transplant it to the garden, you want to harden the plant off, which means so it's been growing indoors under artificial light. It's not used to the harsh sunlight and environmental conditions it's going to experience in the garden. So you want to gradually introduce it to those conditions over, say, 4 days to a week. Okay, so the way you do that is around transplant time, you're going to start taking your plants out. So on the first day, I take them out, put them maybe in a shady spot for about an hour or an hour and a half. Okay, then bring them back in under the lights. The next day, take them out, put them in the sun for a couple hours, but no more. Okay, you can really damage your plants at this time if you expose them to too much sun after they've been growing indoors. So a couple hours of direct sunlight, maybe on the second day, and then gradually over the course of several more days, just expose them to more and more light until they're able to spend the entire day outside without any problems. Ideally, you do this over about a week. We've done it in 4 to 5 days, and that's worked well as well. And if you want some more tips on how to plant your tomatoes in the garden, visit us at humbleorganics.com. We have some good tips on that, and particularly on how to get your plants out early, because that's a really important thing if you have a short growing season like we have in Colorado. So you can check out some of the information on Humble Organics. So I hope this video is helpful to you, and enjoy your gardening.